Okay, hi. I know we still have a few people joining, but we'll go ahead and get started because I know you're all anxious to hear what's going to happen today, and also then have your afternoon, the rest of your afternoon for Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all fathers and out there. Welcome to my world kitchen. I'm really grateful that you're with us again this week. I hope if this is your first time, you enjoy it and you come back month after month. You check out WPSU.org/World Kitchen, and you can watch all of the previous episodes. So today, I'm really delighted to have a friend with me, Patrick, our guest chef, and he will explain who he is and where he's from, and then he'll get started. So come on in, Patrick.
Buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Classic Italian. I'm Patrick Tunno, and I'm just really honored to be with you today as a guest chef. And I'm especially happy because today's Father's Day. And Father's Day is a day that I typically would have spent at my Italian grandparents' house around the table celebrating, because you see, my food journey really isn't about food at all. It's about family. And that's where all this began. My grandmother, who grew up outside of Naples, Italy, expressed her love through. And, you know, there were two things that you could be sure of every time we went over to my grandparents' house. One was that my grandmother, who was in her 70s and not even quite 5 feet tall, was going to off the ground, swing you around, and give you a huge hug. And is that on any given day, her dining room table might have collapsed from the weight of all the food and dishes that she prepared on it. Because again, she expressed her love through food, and she must have loved us an awful, awful lot. So whenever I taste something that has those classic Italian flavors that I grew up with, like the Lasagna Bolognese that I'm going to make for you, and the tiramisu, it brings me back to sitting around the table with family and friends, celebrating a holiday like today. So happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, of course, and grandfathers and all those. And it takes me back to just sitting there for hours, laughing and talking and eating and enjoying food. And as the wine flowed a little bit and our cheeks got somewhat rosy, my dad and my uncle, happy Father's Day, guys, would pull out their accordions. They start playing. We'd all start singing. We'd be dancing, and we might take a brief interlude to go outside and play a game of bocce, only to come back in for some dessert, like the tiramisu we're having now, and some espresso with sambuca. And this was true not only for my Italian-American family here in the U.S., but also for my family in Italy. My grandfather immigrated from the Abruzzo region of Italy. And when I was a kid, I was lucky enough to be able to go back with him to visit his family. And even though he emigrated nearly 7 years prior, we were treated like absolute loyalty and really embraced with open arms. He grew up essentially in poverty. As a boy, his job was a shepherd. He'd go out all day long to watch the sheep with just a loaf of not even a loaf, a little piece of crusty bread. And on a good day, he might have a piece of cheese to bring with him too. And not even a bottle to drink out of. He told me he had to drink out of a stream when he was a kid because they couldn't afford a bottle. So just the hospitality that was shown to us by the family members who had stayed behind in Italy and never came to America got me so enamored with the food, with the culture, with the family, with the language. I knew that I had to learn Italian, and I did. Ultimately, I went back to Italy to earn a master's degree, and then I actually went back for cooking school. I went to Accademia Barilla in Parma. I did a course at Italy in Milan. I even earned a certificate in professional espresso preparation from Cafe Mocha Floor in Florence. But that's enough about me. Let's get this Lasagna Bolognese, which is not too complicated to make, and its taste. I think when you taste it, you're going to feel like you're on some narrow cobblestone street somewhere in Bologna at a trattoria, and some Italian known as bringing out a hot piping dish of lasagna. And when you taste this tiramisu, your guests will absolutely feel like they are royalty when they taste it. It's not that difficult to make. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to make. So let's get to this, and there'll be no doubt when you prepare these two dishes from your family, from your friends, they will know how much you really care about them, how much you're expressing your love through food. So the first thing we're going to do is make our lasagna alla bolognese. We need to make our sofrito. Sofrito comes from the Italian verb soffriggere, to saute, to fry. And it's a base of really any ragu, any meat sauce that we make. And what we're going to do for this one is pretty simple. We're going to use some carrot and we're going to use some onion. So if you come over with me, I have this food processor right here. And in it, I'm going to drop some carrots and some onions. And I have about a medium white onion. I use the white. I don't love the red onions. I think it gives it too strong of a taste. And a couple carrots that I've kind of chunked up here. You can dice these if you want, but honestly, for the sake of time, and I want to keep things simple, what's important is to keep things simple and make something you can really enjoy. So I'll pulse this 3 or 4 times. Bear with me as I pulse it just a couple times. Okay, so here is the kind of consistency that we're going for. You see these little pieces here, and it's rustic. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's the thing about Italian cooking, is we're not striving for perfection. We're striving for something that's really delicious. And it doesn't have to be 100% authentic either. What we want to have is capture the essence of it, but you're not going to make 100% authentic cuisine because you know, we're not in Italy. The ingredients are a little bit different, but we'll make stuff that comes pretty close. All right, so here I'm going to use my olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, of course, Italian if you can, and I'm going to use 3 tablespoons. Now, an Italian would kind of eyeball this. And it might depend on the kind of meat that ultimately you're going to use to make this lasagna alla bolognese. We're using a mix of beef, pork, and veal, but if you use a drier meat, you might want to use a little more oil. If you use something that was a little fattier, you might want to use a little less. It's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it will be good. Okay. So the first thing I do, I have this on a medium heat here, and I'm going to put in all of my sofrito right in here, carrot and onion, kind of diced, a little bit rough, rustic, and that's how we like it. This will cook for about 5 minutes, and you don't want it to burn. You want it to get nice and translucent. So we'll let that go. And while that's going, we're going to start our bechamel sauce. Bechamel is a sauce that comes from French cooking. So it's part of the French origins, bechamel in Italian, but it's in a lot of Italian dishes. And for me, I think it's the secret of making lasagna alla bolognese is the bechamel sauce. So how we make this, and we're going to start to do it right while our sofrito is getting nice and translucent. We're going to take a half a stick of butter. So here you go. And I've melted this a little bit. I took it out a little bit prior. You don't have to, but it might make it a little easier. And this melts in our pan. So I'm going to just let it melt. And once it starts to get almost completely melted, I'm going to add a 1/4 tablespoon of, not tablespoon, that would be an awful little bit, a 1/4 cup of flour. I'll put it in there, but I'm going to wait till it's almost nearly melted. And something that's really nice when you make this is to use a whisk that has a silicone coating, particularly if you're using a non-stick pan. And this pan happens to be just it doesn't have a non-stick coating, and it works okay because the butter is a natural lubricant, so it's not going to stick. But you do want to be careful, particularly if you haven't made it before. A non-stick pan might be a nice way to do it. Okay. So here we go. Let's continue here. It's almost completely melted. And then once it's completely melted, I'm going to take this flour. I'm going to drop it in. Okay, I'm going to do about half. I'm going to whisk really quickly. So you can see how quickly I'm going to whisk it here. I don't want it to burn. And what that does is that cooks off that flour taste, and you begin to make just a simple roux. And a bechamel sauce is no more than a roux with milk added. And while I'm doing this, we're going to multitask. I'm going to give a little stir to my sofrito as well. Now we're at the point where I can add the other half of this 1/4 cup of flour. I'll whisk that in. And it's good if you take it off the heat. So as I whisk it in here, you can see all the flour has disappeared. We've made this really nice paste. Okay. So I'm going to set it, I'm going to shut this off, this burner here, because I don't want it to burn. I want to incorporate my milk. When you're making a bechamel sauce, you want to use whole milk. And the reason you want to use whole milk is because it's a nice creamy sauce. You want really the benefit of the full fat. So I'll add about a half of the milk first. The milk could be right out of the refrigerator. It could actually be warmed first, which is what I did. I've seen folks do it both ways. I've done it both ways. Do not stress, it will turn out. The important thing is here that was really stir it well. You incorporate all that roux because you don't want it to burn, and you certainly don't want lumps. But if you get a few lumps, sometimes life gives you lumps. That's no problem at all. All right, so I am stirring my sofrito, and I'm going to put the rest of my milk in. So the final addition here of the milk. I'm going to turn the heat back on. The heat we want now to be about a medium high. And then we'll let this cook until it starts to boil. We want to continue to stir it because the last thing we want to do is we don't want it to burn. All right. Give my sofrito another stir. And I'm going to keep an eye on this. And then once this begins to boil, I'm going to drop in just a pinch of salt. But I think we've reached a really good point where we can add our meat and begin to incorporate our meat into our ragu. So here we go. One nice smooth flow, and we simply chunk it up. That's it. It's simple enough.
If anyone's cooking along and has any questions, be sure to put your question in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask Patrick directly. And also, if you are cooking along with us and it's moving too fast for you, just let us know and we'll try to slow it down a little. But I know Patrick has a lot to get through.
Okay. So here we go. It's beginning to brown, and I'm keeping an eye on that bechamel. I'm stirring it. It hasn't quite come to a boil yet. But, you know, there's a just wonderful fragrance when you have this ragu starting to cook and the meat begins to brown. It reminds me of when I was at my Aunt Amelia's house in Italy. And my Aunt Amelia spoke only dialects. So Italy, if you don't know, was founded as a country only about 150 years ago. Before that, it was almost a series of little nation states and different places. And there were so many different folks who occupied Italy that there were a lot of different languages. So there's different dialects throughout Italy. And my aunt only spoke dialect. My Italian was not very good. I was just 12 years old. And I'm in the kitchen only with her, and she's cooking. And I smell this wonderful, and I'm continuing to stir my bechamel, by the way. And I smell this wonderful, wonderful, bouquet in the kitchen of this meat cooking on the stove. And I said, Aunt Amelia, in my broken Italian, and I said, I'd like to taste. That smells really good. Could I have some? And she looked at me and she kind of ignored me, which was odd because she was a very lovely woman. And so I asked her again. I insisted. I thought maybe my Italian wasn't so good. And I tried again. I just could I taste? And she finally relented. And she takes out this bowl and she gives me some. And I walked outside onto the patio. I sit there and I go, this isn't bad. I mean, it wasn't the greatest thing I've had, but it was pretty good. So as I'm eating this, I just about finished the bowl. And I see Aunt Amelia open the door. And I look and she takes a pan out. And I said, I didn't ask for more. Why should she bring this pan out? She takes a pan, she dumps it on the ground into a dog's dish, and the dog kind of lumbers up and starts lapping up the dog food that she had prepared for him. Italian dogs eat pretty well. It was pretty good. I have no idea to this day what I ate. I don't want to know what I ate, but I've seen Italians make pasta for their cats and all kinds of crazy stuff, and it makes it really fun about experiencing their culture. So I'm continuing to stir my bechamel. It's just about come to a boil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my salt and just do a pinch. All right, this is sea salt. I love sea salt for this in there. Okay. And then at this point, we can turn it down just a little bit. Okay, there we go.
Patrick, you have a question.
Okay.
Maria would like to know, is that beef, pork, veal, mix of ground meat? What is it?
Boy, that's a great question, Maria. I'm so glad you asked. This happens to be a mix of pork, beef, and veal, which is really convenient. A lot of supermarkets and butchers make what's called a meatloaf mix. You just want to make sure they don't have like a spice packet used in there when it's made. I've made it with all beef before. I've made it with with the veal before or different things, and it turns out great anyway. Folks, even if you want to try and make it a little healthier, which is great to do, but if we're making lasagna bolognese, let's go full fat. It's you can make it with turkey too. That would be okay as well. But I like beef, pork, and veal for this particular dish. Okay, I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit here to get this browning some more. I'm going to give my bechamel Another turn or so. All right. And in the meanwhile, while this is browning, I want to tell you something else. So what's going to come next? Well, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, as soon as this finishes browning, I'm going to incorporate these tomatoes, or pomodori, we say in Italian. And on my recipe sheets, I said, look, try and get San Marzano DOP tomatoes. Why? Why San Marzano DOP tomatoes? What's the difference? Who cares? Isn't that kind of just cooking snobbery? Well, yes and no. You see, Italy has a phenomenal climate for growing tomatoes, number one. Second, DOP means Denominazione d'Origine Protetta, which means protected designation of origin in English. And so there's actually Italian law that governs how these tomatoes are grown, where they can be grown, and so forth. So DOP, San Marzano tomatoes, grow at the fertile soil at the base of Mount Vesuvius. So all this volcanic ash goes down and makes these phenomenal tomatoes. They're grown in the Italian sun, right near, not too far away from Naples. And the climate is just perfect. So they come out to be actually a little bit not quite as watery as the tomatoes that you might get here in the US. There's really attention to detail in how they're grown. So that's a big part of it. And their quality, and they have kind of a sweet, mellow flavor. And don't forget to stir your bechamel, or it will stick. Okay, so that's number one. That's a really important thing when you're making this. And it's not going to be 100% like you would get in Italy, because we're not in Italy. But the San Marzano tomatoes, the DOP, really step it up a notch. And they're not that much more expensive than what you would typically get. Now, at this point, if you look at my sauce, it's just about, my ragu is just about ready. And if I were using wine, which I'm not today, because I don't want you to feel like you have to make this as wine, I put in a quarter cup of wine right now, or as much as you like. Well, not as much as you like, not a bottle. But, quarter cup, an eighth of a cup, a little bit more than that, that's okay. I put it in there. And I'm not going to, I wouldn't drain this either. The grease really makes it good. And the sfoglia, the pasta sheets, will soak it up pretty well too. Okay. So I'm not going to put that in right about now. I would do that. I would let it steam out for maybe just 30 seconds or a minute. So if you're cooking with me, you can go ahead and do that. If you like to cook with white wine in particular, it works really, really well for this. All right. So the bechamel is coming along nicely. And I'm going to grab my tomatoes. All right, and I'm going to plop them right in. And what you'll notice with these tomatoes, when you get the San Marzano, you get the DOP, they almost melt. I mean, I'm not going to even crush them up. I can use my spoon to break them, and they kind of melt right into the pan. Look at that. And that's beautiful. And if you don't get them completely wonderfully blended, that is fine. Because rustic cuisine is what my grandmother used to make. It wasn't perfect. It was delicious. It was about perfection, the time you spent together. It wasn't about perfection in everything you cook, but this is going to be pretty close to perfect when we're done. You can see how that bechamel is sticking up really, really nicely. And I think we're ready here to move on to the next step. So the bechamel should maybe cook for just a few more minutes. And once you incorporate all these tomatoes in here in your ragu, I'd let that go. I'd turn it down to about low, and I would cook that for about 20 minutes. If you're in a hurry, you could just throw it in there. But I think if you wait about 20 minutes, it will be a little bit of a drier sauce. It won't be as wet, and it's going to come out a little bit better. So what I've done for you is I prepared this in advance. I have a finished product of what you're going to see, and this is what we'll be using to layer the lasagna with. So I'm going to shut my burner off here. Okay. And I'm going to switch. Wow, the bechamel. That's beautiful. What I want you guys to do when you make bechamel, you want to make it so it's just thick enough so it kind of coats the back of your spoon. This is almost ready. I've seen folks do a little bit soupier. It will make you have a little bit wetter lasagna. I like it so it kind of sticks to the back of the spoon. That's what I have. Now, the secret ingredient with bechamel is nutmeg. And because you use you use a good bit of this, the lasagna is big, you can use probably about a quarter of a tablespoon of a teaspoon or more, but I kind of go nuts because I think it gives it that classic flavor, that classic Italian flavor. You can see how much I've got in there. And then I'm going to take a little bit of white pepper, which is a little milder than black pepper. Black pepper is perfectly fine. And you can see those being incorporated really, really well into this beautiful, beautiful bechamel. And I'll do one last thing. I'll do a bit of salt here. Again, this is sea salt, and you can be generous with that. You can see I'm being pretty generous with my salt. And that bechamel is just about ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to shut that off. And in the meantime, what I would like to do is I have some pasta boiling here. And I mentioned that for the pasta, I like the no-bake pasta. If you really wanted to go nuts, you can make homemade pasta. We're not going to do that today because we want to keep things simple and do something that you can enjoy with your own family and your own friends. So these are really nice, these no-bake pastas. However, I found that when you put them into the lasagna, oftentimes they may absorb too much sauce and come up with a dry lasagna. So what I do is I drop them into a pot of boiling water that's salted with sea salt for just a few minutes. A box should be enough. That's about 15 to 20 sheets of lasagna. We'll drop them in, and I prepared an ice bath over here so we can make this relatively quick and not burn the heck out of our fingers when we do it. 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just going to throw them all in. That way we'll have a little bit of extra just in case. And then we need to be in here for really a minute or two. And while I'm doing it, I can smell that bechamel and the nutmeg. Yeah, nutmeg is a secret that you use in a lot of Italian dishes. Anytime you have tortellini, you have ravioli that are really authentic, they have nutmeg in there. So it is kind of a secret ingredient that we use. Okay, so I'm going to move my bechamel out of the way because I want to make sure I have some room to take these out. And the nice thing about these sheets is they're pretty easy to cut and form. You can look at them right here. I'm going to drop them right in. You want to be careful when they get in there as to not have them stick together because that will make them hard to work with. Okay. So you grab just a couple if you can at a time. And when I drop them in, I kind of try and drop them a little bit crisscross too. That helps from sticking. And you can move them around as soon as you get them in there. That helps. All right, I'm almost done. Just got a couple more. Now, if you're making homemade pasta for this, which is a fun thing to do, if you've got a kind of a Saturday to kill, you would do it the same way. You just drop them in. You can use a homemade pasta as well. But I think this makes it pretty close to being authentic. And notice I'm using my hand right in here, and I'm not burning the heck out of myself, which is a good thing. Hey, one last thing I want to mention as we make our meat sauce, if you've been cooking with me, I do like to throw in some fresh herbs with this. So I have some parsley here that I grew in my garden. My grandparents always had a real big garden, and they grew all this stuff. And it's one of the things I like to do as well. I do some gardening. So fresh parsley works really well, and I do basil. I don't do anything really other than that. So we'll rip it up, and ripping it up is fine. Again, rustic is good. You get a nice big chunk of basil or parsley. That's great. And they'll cook down. So. And that essentially is what your finished sauce will look like. Of course, you'll add salt and pepper to taste. So a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, and we're done. Our ragu is ready to go. All right. So now we're going to move on to the fun phase of assembling our lasagna bolognese. So I'm going to bring this pan right here. I'm going to set it down. And I've got my ingredients here. I've got my bechamel. I have my ragu that we just made. I've also got some grated cheese. And that's a mixture of pecorino romano and Parmigiano-Reggiano. And you might say, well, can't I just use that stuff from the little container I get in the store, the Kraft one? When we use cheese, and this is one thing that makes it pretty well authentic, I like Parmigiano-Reggiano and Pecorino Romano mixed, or one or the other is fine. Parmigiano-Reggiano, again, DOP, protected designation of origin, is really just a phenomenal cheese. And the way the production of cheese started was back in the Middle Ages. Monks had too much milk left over. And so they started making cheese to preserve it. So the recipe of Parmigiano-Reggiano has happened over hundreds and hundreds of years. They've created this cheese. And today, again, it's regulated by the government. The cows are only milked a certain number of times a day. They eat a certain type of grass, of water. They eat every when they're fed. And also, it has to be aged for a minimum of 12 months. The cows are a certain breed. They come from a certain area, et cetera, et cetera. So it really does make the cheese phenomenal because there's tremendous amount of quality control that goes through. And Pecorino Romano is a really nice sheep cheese. It's salty. It gives an earthy, rustic flavor. So that's why I like to mix it. But if you only have Parmigiano, that's fine. If you happen to have American Parmesan, that's okay, depending on which one you get. And if you have Pecorino Romano, I made it just only with Pecorino. That works well too. So it's up to you. So that's the kind of cheese we're going to use. And about a generous cup of that is really great. You also want to have that other half a stick of butter. I got mine pre-cut here in little slices. And I have peas. And you don't need peas to make this, but my Aunt Marie in Italy would always make it with peas. And making a lasagna with peas, or maybe some spinach or some zucchini or something, just it makes it extra special because when you bite into a pea, you get something, aesthetically it's pleasing, but you get something that crunches a little bit when you take a bite. It's a nice balance out for the texture. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I got my pan right here. I'm going to just take a little bit and I'm going to spread it here on the bottom. And you don't need to go nuts. This sauce through the entire lasagna. So I'll just spread just a little bit so it doesn't stick to the bottom. And that's really it. We're good to go. A little bit in each corner, a little bit in the middle. See that? Very light. Then I'm going to take my sfoglie di lasagna, my lasagna sheets, as we would say in English, and I layer them in. And notice I got a little room here. What do? Well, I could break it like this, and that's okay if it's not broken perfectly. I could overlap it, although that might be a little doughy. But it's okay. This is kind of a dish that has some imperfection to it. I even have a little piece in there, and that's perfectly fine. The perfection is the time you spend when you enjoy it. Okay. And then after this, what am I going to do? Well, we're going to start layering all of our ingredients. And I'll do half of this ragu on this layer. Then I'll make one more layer and I'll do the other half of the ragu. So if you want a little bit of a guide of how you're going to do it. And I like to always get a little bit in the corner and the edges first because those are the ones that tend to dry out. So do that first. Then I go ahead and I put a little bit in the middle. Okay. And again, it's a little messy. That's fine. That's how you're going to have it. Then next, you could go in really any order you want. It's kind of like art in a sense. When I say art, maybe like Jackson Pollock, kind of splattering paint here in my bechamel. Okay, and again, I like a little bit in the corner. Bechamel, you also want to take your time with. And the reason you want to do that is because you want to save some for the next layer. And then your final layer of this lasagna, bolognese, you're going to finish with only bechamel. So you want a spatula for that. And some of the Parmigiano-Reggiano pecorino mix or whichever cheese you have. And just a little bit of butter. So speaking of butter, wouldn't that make this good? So I have some pre-cut butter here. Use about half on this one for a third, and then save just a little dab for the top. And you'll use some on your next layer as well. So again, we'll have 2 layers and we'll have a top. And this is melted a little bit. It makes it easy to work with. And next, we'll take our cheese. So I'll just sprinkle some of that on right here. How about the peas? Yeah, let's do that too. Okay. And this makes me think of Aunt Maria and being at her house in Poggio di Roio, Italy, where I first had this with peas. And just look at that. I mean, it's suitable for framing in my mind, but my mind is kind of obsessed with food. So, I think I could do actually a glob or 2 more of this wonderful ragu because it just looks so good. I'm going to do our next layer. I'm going to go the other way this time. And I'm going to kind of do it, stagger them like this. And then, of course, I'll have to fill in these gaps with a sheet of pasta, which I can do. I can simply break it in half. Okay, one here and one here. So we've got to do the same thing again, our ragu, and I can be generous this time because I know I'm using all of it. This is not going to have red sauce on the top of it, or our ragu will not be on top. And you can see there's herbs in there. It looks really, really good. I'm starting to get hungry. I hope you are too. All right, so I'm going to use about half of this remaining cheese. And again, the order is not the exact same. That's okay. Doesn't matter. It's all going to melt together and blend together and be great. I'm going to save about this much for the end. I'll do my peas. You could use them all if you want. If you don't like peas, you don't have to use it. You could throw in frozen spinach. You could throw in some grated or chopped zucchini. That would be great as well. And I'm going to do some bechamel, being mindful to save about half of this for the top and final layer of our lasagna. All right. Beautiful. Bellissimo questa lasagna. All right, I couldn't help myself. When I'm cooking, I just want to speak Italian. And I think we got everything. We didn't do the butter. No one in the chat told me. So let's do a little bit of this butter.
Patrick, Carolyn from the chat says, Patrick is so good at explaining why we should use these quality ingredients. Delicioso, and thanks.
Oh, grazie mille. È un piacere. I'm glad I'm helpful. Okay. And again, it's not about being elitist with our food, but you do want to make something relatively authentic, something relatively good. Look at this. This one is a little different color. This was from a different package, and that's okay. That is perfectly fine. And I want this to be covered up pretty well, this final layer, so I'll overlap them. Here, and look, we're missing a little layer there, but that's good. It'll fit in. And I've got one final. Perfect. Perfect. What I want to do, I want to take this bechamel, and to do this, I highly recommend that you use a spatula for this final little bit. Here we go. And you're thinking, only there? Well, no, I'm going to spread it out. Relax. Okay. Look at that. Spread it nice and thick and rich. And occasionally those want to get up. They want to move around. And really what you want to make sure, it doesn't have to be perfect. And actually I like when it's a little bit imperfect. It just looks really pretty and rustic. Kind of like a Tuscan villa, you know, where you have the a bit of the spackling on the outside is kind of, that's what we're going for. Tuscan villa. All right. Look, that's perfect. So I would take this, and I have just a little bit of butter left. I'm going to put a piece here, maybe one here and there. You could use a little more. If you use too much butter, it would be really good, but I will tell you that it might get a little greasy on top. So I think the presentation is better if you don't go crazy with the butter, but go crazy with the cheese, because when you do it with this cheese, it's going to make a beautiful, beautiful crust. There we go. Look at that. We're ready to put this in the oven. So what do? We take this and we cover it with a piece of foil. Your oven should be preheated to about 400 degrees. And then you have it in there for approximately half an hour. Now, I would take it out for the last 5 or 10 minutes. Not take it out, but remove the aluminum foil, because if you do that, you get a really gold, beautiful brown crust. And what I like to do is I like to season this or garnish it with a little bit of fresh parsley, fresh basil, whatever you have. So we're going to go ahead and get that lasagna, and I'm going to get it for you. So just bear with me 1 minute. As I put on my holders and do the magic of Zoom cooking, here we are. You can see this beautiful lasagna alla Bolognese. And I think we might just be able to take a little bit of a piece out of it. It's hot. It just came out of the oven. Look at this beautiful crust here you have, right? It's kind of crunching in there, but it's soft. So let's see how it is. And it might be messy. This just came out of the oven. That's okay. Messy is good. My mother used to say the sign of a good sandwich is that it falls apart. I think she'd just to appease me so I wouldn't complain, but I kind of agree. When you have a good, really, really delicious dish, it might fall apart a little bit. So here you go. This is what we're done with. This is the final product, our lasagna alla Bolognese. And I think your guests are going to love it. But that's not enough. It's time for dessert. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start making a tiramisu. All right, so to make a tiramisu, we need a couple things. We need eggs. We need 4 eggs, as a matter of fact. 4 egg yolks and 2 egg whites. You have an extra 2 egg whites left, that's okay. You need powdered sugar. We're going to have a cup of powdered sugar that we're going to use. A quarter of that will go in a mixture with espresso coffee. So you're going to need espresso coffee as well. And you're also going to need lady fingers, or soffiati, we call them in Italian. About 24 of those. One of those packs that you get at the store should be just enough depending on the size dish you get. You might want to start with a smaller dish if you're not sure, unless you have enough. And then we need mascarpone cheese. And again, that's something we use 2 of the 8-ounce containers, about 2 cups or so of mascarpone cheese is that what it ends up being. And I love a little bit of dark chocolate on top of that. And it gives a really, really nice contrast with the sweet flavor you're going to have. So we use that one to make it as well. And brandy, I know. About 2 tablespoons of brandy really mixes it. If you don't like alcohol, that's okay. In fact, I've made it before, even with like chocolate milk for kids, right? It'll be good without the alcohol, so that's completely fine. But I do think brandy and coffee goes really well together to make this just really, truly delightful. So let's get cooking. The first thing I would do if I'm making this, I would grab my cafetiera or my mocha in Italian. These are really neat. They make really strong Italian coffee. Essentially, you put water in, you put in a filter, you put in your coffee, you screw it on, and you make them in the stove. If you don't have a cafetiera, you can get them just about anywhere these days. But if you don't have one, a cup of really strong coffee will do it. So don't worry about it. But that's what I use today. Is I use my mocha, my cafetiera, to make the coffee. And you want to let it cool a little bit if you can. Otherwise, it can be hard to work with, and your lady fingers might fall apart under the heat. So you want to make sure that they remain intact. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're essentially going to make, I'm going to whip my egg whites, which I have them in the fridge now, and I'll bring them out. And I've also broken some egg yolks in advance as well into the bowl. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to make essentially meringue. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to whip these up. Again, just 2 egg whites. I'm going to whip them up for approximately about 2 minutes. I'm just going to show you how to get it started, and then I'll have the information come back through. So what I'm doing here is I'm just do this for just a second or two to show you. But you put them in a nice big bowl. You have to be careful, don't splatter everywhere. And this is just really to incorporate air into these. And it makes a really wonderful, nice, fluffy dessert. Okay, so I think that's about good. When we're finished with this, we have here a meringue. And this is what it's going to look like. I'll spare you 2 minutes of me using that mixer, but it kept this really, really nice, fluffy consistency that we add to the tiramisu. Then I'm going to grab my egg yolks. I've got 4 that I broke in advance into this pan. And I mentioned you need a cup of powdered sugar. So what I did is I have taken about 3/4 of that cup. I left it here, and I'm going to incorporate that in with my egg yolks. So there we go. I'm going to grab my whisk, do that. And really what you want is just to get that nice and incorporated in there. And if you're viewing this in a bowl, I recommend you use the bigger bowl for the egg yolks. Because into that dish, we're going to incorporate, there we go, look at that, it's done. It is done. We're going to incorporate our mascarpone. And I have 2 containers here of it. Again, these 8-ounce containers are perfectly fine if you buy a bigger portion. That's okay too. But when you do that, you want to make sure you have about approximately 2 cups. And it doesn't need to be perfect. So this is good to go. I'm going to take this out. Done with that. And you want to do it fairly gently because you want to have a light, somewhat fluffy consistency. I think it's helpful if you take out the mascarpone a little bit in advance. You don't have to. If you don't, that's okay. But I think it makes it a little bit easier to work with personally. That's just how I do it. As I start to mash it in here, you'll see. Sometimes folks worry, can I eat raw eggs? That's up to you. I've been doing it for years. I've never had a problem. That's how a lot of tiramisu is made. I've seen folks heat up sugar and pour it in and kind of pasteurize the eggs. You could look up and see if that's something you want to try if you're worried about that. But like I said, I've been eating tiramisu for years, and I've never had an issue with it. So, all right, here we go. So that's nicely mixed in. And then I want to take my egg whites, and I want to do this really pretty gently because these are nice and fluffy. They have a lot of air incorporated in, and that's going to make our tiramisu give it that ethereal quality. Okay. And you notice it's going to get real nice and almost soupy here. And that's going to be wonderful between the layers of these lady fingers. So today we're doing layers with our cooking, with our lasagna and with our tiramisu. Wow, there we go. That looks really, really nice. So what do we do next? Well, next I have my espresso. As you guys can see, I've pre-made it. I put it in a bowl. What I didn't do is I didn't incorporate the remaining quarter cup of the powdered sugar. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to incorporate that in here. And I'm just going to grab a fork and give it a quick stir. Fork, spoon, whatever you have, it's fine. Now, if you like alcohol and you're happy with that, you can do the alcohol really to taste. I think 2 tablespoons of brandy is great. I'm going to do that by the cap. 1, say 2 and a little bit, gives us approximately 2 tablespoons. I could get my tablespoon, but it's somewhere behind me. Again, doesn't have to be precise. Just don't add the full bottle. Okay. So next, we grab our pan. You see how simple that was? This is one of the most elegant desserts that is just so simple to make. Now, I grab these lady fingers, or so you got to do in Italian. And they're really nice. You can find them in a lot of supermarkets. You used to only go to find them in Italian grocery stores. And what do? We take them and we dip them into our coffee. And we just roll it really quickly. And not too long, because if we do it too long, they will fall apart. I'm going to do it this way. You know, what's funny is tiramisu literally translates to tirare, mi su, tiramisu. Tirare means to pour, to pick. Me is a direct pronoun me, as in myself, me. Su, up, pick me up. And that makes sense because, it's laden with brandy and sugar and coffee, espresso. So when you make tiramisu, it makes sense that they would call it pick me up. Well, my son, Alessandro, I only speak to him since he was a baby, actually, in Italian. And in fact, right now, if I try to speak in English, he gets upset. So I only speak to him in Italian. And one day, we had never made tiramisu before. One day, about a year ago, I said, Alessandro, oggi facciamo tiramisu. Today, we're going to make tiramisu. And Alessandro stops, and he looks at me, and he says, Dad, I can't pick you up. You're too heavy. And it was just the cutest thing. I mean, at that moment, I was so proud that he had learned a language and he understood what it meant, even though he had never heard of the dessert. Now he knows what tiramisu is. He knows I'm making it. He's going to demand a piece when I get home. Anyways, we've done one layer with the lady fingers, and now I'm going to take about half of this mixture and just simply put it right on top, because we're going to do 2 layers. And I want to finish with the layer of mascarpone. So about half of this is perfect. In here. Okay. And we've got a nice, beautiful kind of cream color. Beautiful. I think I could use just a little more. I like to get all the corners here. And that is a nice looking. Now, my secret is this dark chocolate. I think semi-sweet chocolate is great for this. And the reason I think it's so great is because tiramisu is really sweet, all the powdered sugar. The dark chocolate gives a little bit of contrast. It has some bitter notes, and it's crunchy. So I actually just took some chocolate chips and I diced them up. You can use your favorite bar of chocolate that you like. That works too. And I'm just going to drop it in. You can use as much or as little as you want. I've seen folks use those chocolate-covered coffee beans, different things, but I really like this. And that'll be a nice surprise layer in the middle. Next, I'm going to finish off here. I'll go the other direction this time. Why not? Okay, so we'll go this way. and the other way. And I think a rookie mistake on this is using too big of a dish. So I think if you can, use a pan that's not just so huge when you do it. We are almost there. I can fit one in here. Where else can I fit one? I think I can fit one in here, and I think I could do one over here too. Okay. Yeah. And there we go. And one more. Perfect. You have a little coffee left over with some brandy sugar. So if you're really tired, you can go for it. I probably don't recommend it. All right. So now I'm going to take the rest of this mascarpone. It's kind of all over the place here. We'll fix it up. And we'll spread it on top. There we go. And it's beautiful. It really just a beautiful dessert. The thing about tiramisu is it's very quick to make, but you can't eat it immediately. You put it in the fridge overnight, if you can, even a full day or two. And all those lady fingers, they soak up the coffee, the mascarpone, and they just become really delicious. All right, so I'm going to just clean this up a little bit here. Okay. And what I want to do, well, I want to double up chocolate on it, of course. So I'm going to put some more of this right in there. There we go. Perfect. Okay. We'll save a little bit to garnish again. Now, you could be done. This could be your tiramisu, and it would be perfectly delicious. But if you want to make it extra special for your guests, I recommend you make a whipped cream topping. Whipped cream topping is pretty easy to do. You just got to get a full fat, heavy whipping cream. It whips better if it's cold. And you're going to take that, you take a pint of that, you pour it into a pretty big bowl, you get your mixer, and you add 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar to it, and you add your vanilla extract as well. So you want to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So we're going to do that right now. So I got some heavy whipping cream right here. I have prepared my 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar. There you go, in this bowl. So I'm putting it in here. And then pure vanilla extract, which gives it a really nice taste. And I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of that. Okay. So we have right here our mixer. I'm going to mix it up. This takes about 2 or 3 minutes to make. So I'll show you how to get it started, but you can finish it at home. Okay, so when you're finished with this whipped cream, it's going to look exactly like this. And you whip it to the point where it forms stiff peaks. You don't want to do it too much, because if you do it too much, what's going to happen is it's going to end up falling apart. So it begins to actually lose some of its integrity there. So you want to, and look at the contrast. You can see the kind of yellow from egg yolks in there. Then we're going to spread this beautiful cream on top, and it'll give it a nice, delicate balance here. Okay. We're almost done, just a little bit more. I got another corner or 2 to do. Now, if I were making this for my guests, I would keep this in the fridge for a couple of days, rather at least overnight, and I'd make the whipped topping probably before. Now you could do it like this, that's okay. But I think the whipped topping sometimes is better, the day you make it. But this is the fine way to do it. That really works out well. Got a little bit on here. I'll clean off just for show. And so what do? Well, I like to finish with, again, some more chocolate. Okay. And if you have an old salt shaker, or you have one of these great bakery shakers, what I like to do is I take it and I'm going to dust this. And look at the dust. Oh, isn't that nice? And you cover it all with, this is just essentially baking cacao, pure cacao. And I'll just dust the whole thing before I serve it. And you could go really crazy. You could do you could cover the entire thing. So it's completely covered in cacao, and that's going to taste outstanding. Now, What's it going to look like when we couldn't do it? I'm going to give you a piece here that I prepared in advance because again, it needs to sit in the fridge for a day or two. I'll dust this one. A little bit around the plate too, if you really want to get fancy. We can take a look at that and see what it looks like here. Okay, look at that. So, buon appetito. Well, I've just finished making two, I think, phenomenal dishes. A tiramisu, a lasagna bolognese, that I think when your friends and family have them, there will be no doubt how much they really care, how much you really care about them when you serve these to them. You know, I hope you've enjoyed spending time with me today. I've really, just for me, it's been such a share, you know, some of my life philosophy and some of my experiences in this food with you, as I would with my own family. In Italian, there's a proverb: a tavola non si invecchia mai. At the table, which this translates to, at the table, no one ever gets old. Time essentially stands still when you're with your friends, when you're with your family, and when you're celebrating your own food. I think today is a really great day, being Father's Day, to think about that, you know, because for me, it's always been, when I've been on the table with family and friends, I feel like I've got a little slice of eternity. So I hope you spend some really quality, cherished time with your family and friends. I hope you remember those individuals who maybe aren't here with you anymore. I know my own grandfather. I wish I could say Happy Father's Day to him. Happy Father's Day. He's been gone for a number of years now. He's been a big inspiration in my own life. And in Italian, for goodbye, we would say ci vediamo. As my Italian grandmother would say in her Neapolitan dialect, ci vediamo. So I hope to maybe see you again soon, and buon appetito.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. I know you can't smell this, but if you could, you would be so hungry. Alex and I are grateful that Patrick is leaving a little for us for our dinner tonight, so we're excited. I want to thank you all for watching today, and I want to remind you that we will be doing World Kitchen in July, on July 18th, and that will be Persian barbecue. So we'll be out on the deck barbecuing. Look for that coming up on our website next week, and you can register for that one. Thanks again for coming. We appreciate you spending time with us. The recipes, if you haven't seen them, go back to the registration page for World Kitchen Italian, and there's a yellow button there that says download the recipes. That's where you can find all of the recipes. So thank you, and we'll see you next month.